Hello and welcome to a new episode of Nile TV Newsroom Live. I'm Rahan Morsi. If you're watching this show for the very first time, let me reintroduce you to what the show is all about. This show is composed of a number of different segments, and first we're going to take a closer look at the world of politics. Next comes business and finance, and then we learn more about what's happening in the world of technology, in addition to the latest cultural and arts events, and then a closer look at the world of sports. First, we're starting off with politics after the break. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received the heads and representatives of Italian mining companies, namely Burton, Minerali Industrial, and BSM on Tuesday. Presidential spokesman Ahmed Fahmy said the meetings dealt with reviewing prospects for cooperation with Italian companies to maximize the utilization of Egypt's mineral resources. This cooperation comes in light of the success of the industrial cooperation model between Egypt and Italy in the Ain al-Sukhna quartz production complex project, which was inaugurated by the president last May. During the meeting, officials of the Italian companies expressed hopes to intensify work towards deepening the process of cooperation with Egypt. They also affirmed commitment to strengthen joint projects with Egypt. President al-Sisi carefully followed up efforts to push private investment, the thing which reflects a state's keenness to achieve real breakthroughs in the field of mining. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and the Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry arrived in the Russian city of St. Petersburg as part of an African delegation that has traveled to Russia on a self-styled peace mission the day after they went to Ukraine. On behalf of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli is leading the Egyptian delegation that is set to hold talks held talks with the Russian President Vladimir Putin to discuss the joint African initiative to settle the Russian-Ukraine crisis. The delegation had earlier held talks with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky that were followed by joint press conferences. Following the African missions meeting, the Russian President Vladimir Putin on Saturday had met with these leaders who had arrived at St. Petersburg with an initiative to put an end to the Russia-Ukraine war. Putin praised the balanced approach of the African countries towards the Ukraine conflict ahead of a formal talk with the delegation aiming to push for peace between Kiev and Moscow. The Russian president also said that his country is open for talks that aim at settling the Ukrainian crisis. The delegation, which arrived in Russia Saturday, a day after talks in Ukraine, includes 4 presidents: South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa, Senegal's Macky Sall, Zambia's Hakainde Hichilema, and Comoros' Azali Assoumni, who also currently head the African Union. In a speech to the Libyan House of Representatives, Speaker of Egyptian House of Representatives Hanif al-Gibali said Egypt fully supports reinforcing Libya's stability, security and national unity at a press conference on Monday. Gibali said he signed with his Libyan counterpart Aqila Saleh a protocol regarding cooperation between the two houses of representatives in the technical, administrative and financial fields. The protocol will also allow the two houses to exchange information and expertise and visits in an organized and orderly fashion, and said Gibali, noting that in administrative terms, the Secretariat of the two houses will exchange expertise in the area of digital transformation. Libya's representatives and High Council of State reached the agreement in May to start finalizing elections and laws to hold presidential and parliamentary elections, which have been repeatedly postponed in the last 5 years. The 12-member 6+6 committee was formed in March, comprising from Libya's Parliament and High Council of State, with the task of formulating legislation to regulate elections. And moving on, the Israeli occupation forces shot dead a Palestinian near the occupied West Bank city of Bethlehem. Palestinian Health Ministry said Zakaria Mohammed al-Zul, who's 20, was martyred by live Israeli occupation bullets to the head. The official Palestinian news agency Wafa reported the military used live fire, tear gas and stun grenades during the clashes with young Palestinians. Sahoul's death was the latest in a surge of violence linked to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which has killed at least 165 Palestinians. Israel has occupied the West Bank since 1967, and its armed forces routinely carry out patrols and raids in Palestinian towns and cities. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres urged Israel to halt and reverse what he described as troubling and alarming decisions on settlement activity in the occupied West Bank. Deputy UN spokesperson Farhan Haq said in a statement that the Secretary-General reiterates that settlements are a flagrant violation of international law. He added that they are a major obstacle in the realization of a viable two-state solution and a just, lasting and comprehensive peace. He also said the expansion of these illegal settlements is a significant driver of tension and violence and deepens humanitarian needs. Donors at a UN conference pledged close to $1.5 billion to combat the humanitarian crisis in Sudan and help its neighbors host refugees fleeing the fighting. UN Chief Antonio Guterres warned that Sudan is descending into death and destruction at unprecedented speed and urged donors to step in and curb the unfolding catastrophe. The conference comes midway through the three-day ceasefire, which appeared to have brought calm to the capital Khartoum after the failure of earlier truces to secure a corridor of aid. More than 2 months into the fighting, the United Nations is worried the crisis could spill over and destabilize neighboring African countries. Since April 15th, the army led by Abdel Fattah al-Burhan has been battling the RSF, commanded by his former deputy Mohammed Hamdan Daglo, after the two fell out in a power struggle. China and the United States agreed on Monday to stabilize their intense rivalry so it does not veer into conflict, but failed to produce any major breakthrough during a rare visit to Beijing by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The story.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said he had asked China's government to be vigilant about private companies that may be providing Russia with technology that could be used against Ukraine, although he said he had seen no evidence Beijing is providing lethal assistance to Moscow. Blinken spoke on a rare visit to Beijing during which China and the United States agreed to stabilize their intense rivalry so it does not veer into conflict, although the visit did not yield any major breakthrough. Blinken met on Monday, the second day of his visit, with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Western powers have provided Ukraine with billions of dollars in military assistance since Russia invaded in February 2022. China has faced accusations which it denies of supplying lethal weapons to Moscow. China and Russia announced a no-limits partnership shortly before Russia invaded Ukraine. Asked for comment on Blinken's remarks, the Chinese embassy in Washington said China is committed to promoting peace talks and has not provided weapons to either side in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict.
Britain's Parliament delivered another blow to the political career of former Prime Minister Boris Johnson when it endorsed a report that concluded that he deliberately lied over rule-breaking parties. Johnson abruptly resigned from Parliament earlier this month after seeing an advanced copy of the findings of a year-long investigation into his conduct during the COVID-19 pandemic when lockdown-breaking parties were held in Downing Street. The committee published its findings last week, concluding that Johnson had deliberately lied to colleagues when he assured the House of Commons that all COVID-19 rules had been followed at all times in government buildings. The report recommended Johnson should be denied a pass, giving him automatic access to Parliament, and would have recommended suspending him from the House of Commons for 90 days if he had not already resigned. The Swiss feeling the impact of global warming on their rapidly melting glaciers on Sunday backed a new climate bill aimed at steering the country towards carbon neutrality by 2050. A majority of Swiss citizens on Sunday voted in favor of a bill aimed at introducing new climate measures to sharply curb the rich alpine nation's greenhouse gas emissions. Projections by the GFS Bern Institute, based on early vote counting, showed 58% of voters were in favor of the bill that steers Switzerland towards carbon neutrality by 2050. Exact results are expected later. The referendum was sparked by a campaign by scientists and environmentalists to save Switzerland's iconic glaciers, which are melting away at alarming rates. Campaigners initially proposed even more ambitious measures, but later backed a government plan that requires Switzerland to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 through slashing its dependence on imported oil and gas and scaling up the development and the use of greener and more homegrown alternatives. It also set aside more than 3 billion Swiss francs to help wean companies and homeowners abandon fossil fuels. The Nationalist Swiss People's Party, which demanded the popular vote, had claimed that the proposed measures would cause electricity prices to rise. However, backers of the plan argued that Switzerland will be hard hit by global warming and is already seeing the effects of rising temperatures on the famous glaciers. Energy has long been a tricky issue in Switzerland, which imports around 3/4 of its energy, with all the oil and natural gas consumed coming from abroad. In business and finance, the Minister of Petroleum and Mineral Resources, Tariq Al-Mullah, reviewed with the delegation of the Saudi ArcelorMittal Al-Gibal, one of the regional leading companies in the fields of manufacturing oil and gas pipelines, means to enhance bilateral cooperation. Al-Mullah said that the investment atmosphere in Egypt encourages international investment companies to expand their activities in Egypt, namely in the oil and gas fields. During the meeting, the Saudi delegation reviewed an ambitious program to increase the added value of Saudi company operations in Egypt through optimizing the benefits of the geographical proximity between Egypt and Saudi Arabia. And still locally, the governorate of Damaita, the General Authority of Investment and Free Zones, and the Italian Finestra Coalition signed a three-way memorandum of understanding to establish a public free zone in Damaita. The new free zone will be the first to be implemented with private industrial developer systems and the second public free zone in the governorate and a 10th free zone nationwide. According to the Memorandum of Understanding, the Damaita Governorate will allocate more than 183 fadans along the International Coastal Road to establish the public free zone and prepare to receive investment projects. Qatar signed a 27-year gas supply deal with China's CNPC. Qatar has agreed to supply the China National Petroleum Corporation with natural gas for 27 years. The Gulf country's energy minister said Tuesday Qatar will supply about 4 million tons a year, according to the energy minister Saad Al-Qabi. Qatar's energy CEO, 7 months after a deal with the same terms was struck with China's Sinopec. Qatar will supply 4 million tons annually of natural gas from Northfield East expansion project to China across 27 years. This will become the second LNG or liquefied natural gas sale and purchase agreement to China within the Northfield East expansion project. The two deals are the longest seen in the liquefied gas industry. By expanding the exploitation of Northfield, which has the world's biggest natural gas reserves and extends under the Gulf into Iran territory, Qatar is raising its LNG production by 60% plus to 126 million tons a year by 2027. Asian countries led by China, Japan and South Korea are the main market for Qatar's gas, which has been increasingly sought by European countries since Russia's invasion of Ukraine early last year. Still in the Gulf area, buoyed by a swift economic rebound post-COVID, Dubai is racing to attract people and capital to drive long-term growth, betting it can avoid past debt crisis that dented the global ambitions. It also wants to increase the length of its public beaches to 105 kilometers from 21 kilometers by 2040 and revive the dusty Palm Jebel Ali Island abandoned in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. Tourist numbers in 2023 are almost back to the levels of 2019. And last year, Dubai was the world's fourth busiest ultra-prime property market, with 219 home sales over $10 million, according to Knight Frank Research. At the same time, the property price surge and demand for the ultra-high-end segment is stirring memories of old exercises. Abu Dhabi, the UAE's oil-rich capital, eventually stepped in with a $20 billion lifeline, widely expected to be rolled over for a third time. Dubai's population grew over 3.55 million in 2022, according to official statistics, up 2.1% from 2021 and 4% from 2020. In the world of science and technology, a rescue operation is underway deep in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean in search of a technologically advanced submersible vessel carrying 5 people to document the wreckage of the Titanic, the iconic ocean liner that sank more than a century ago. Here's the story.
A submersible taking wealthy tourists to visit the site of the Titanic wreckage in deep waters off the coast of Canada was missing for a third day on Tuesday, as U.S. and Canadian ships and planes swept a huge area trying to find the vessel. 1 pilot and 4 passengers were on board the submersible that went missing on Sunday. The U.S. Coast Guard said adding the vessel could stay underwater for up to 96 hours, although it was unclear if it had researched but unable to communicate. Those aboard the submersible called Titan, the highlight of a tourist expedition that cost $250,000 per person, included British billionaire Hamish Harding and Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood with his son. French media also reported that 77-year-old French explorer Paul Henry was on board. U.S. and Canadian ships and planes began swarming the area on Monday, about 900 miles east of Cape Cod, some dropping sonar buoys that can monitor to a depth of 13,000 feet. The wreckage of the Titanic that sank in 1912 after hitting an iceberg lies at about 12,500 feet. The Titan submersible usually takes 2 hours to descend to the wreck. Ocean Gate Expeditions, the private company that operates the submersible, said it was mobilizing all options to rescue those aboard the Titan. The U.S. Coast Guard said that a boat on the surface, the Polar Prince, lost contact with the submersible about 1 hour and 45 minutes after it began diving toward to the site of the Titanic's wreckage on Sunday.
Chinese President Xi Jinping discussed the global rise of artificial intelligence with Bill Gates on Friday and said he welcomed the U.S. bringing their AI tech to China. Xi discussed with Bill Gates business development in China during the meeting. The comments on AI made at the meeting between Xi and Gates were not disclosed in reports of the meeting or in a Friday post by Gates reflecting on his China trip. Xi has previously said China needs to seize opportunities to use AI to drive economic development, but has also cautioned about the risks with the country weighing up a new law on the technology as well as rules for generative AI. Bill Gates was part of a delegation with the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. And joining us over the phone to tell us more about Bill Gates' visit with the Chinese Premier is Dr. Mohammad Azam, a technology expert. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening to you.
Thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure and honor.
What do you think of the meeting between the Chinese premier and Bill Gates? I mean, China is a powerhouse when it comes to technology, and now he wants to add AI into the mix. Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Can you repeat the question again? Sorry for that.
What do you think of the meeting between the Chinese premier and Bill Gates when he talked about welcoming artificial intelligence into China from the US? How is this significant in terms of the tech industry?
Definitely, this is a great step actually to resolve the issues between the two leading economists. Because technology is always in the core. Technology is always dictating the future of nations and creating wealth on the nation level and enterprise level as well as individual level. And China has progressed with leading technologies that including AI and next telecom systems and quantum computing. And of course, this is in the core and in the heart of the trade war between the two nations, because actually AI as a technology is going to change the whole face of industries in the coming few years, that including the aerospace and defense industry, agriculture, manufacturing, automotive, financial sector, retail sector, the pharmaceutical and healthcare sector. So it's a complete disruptive technology, and of course, leading nations and leading economists are keen to keep this technology within the walls of the nations to progress and to advance their economy as well as their society. And of course, we've seen that in many cases. That's why the Biden administration had a meeting with the top IT sector giants company for discussing what's next for AI, how to mitigate the risk, how to make AI safer and more accessible, as well as how to use AI to create more jobs rather than eradicating jobs. How to use it for eradicating and fighting misinformation and discrimination and so on and so forth, because everyone is looking for a reasonable, responsible way of dealing with AI, because it's becoming a pain for all nations all over the world, not only for the leading economies, but also for developing nations as well.
The Chinese premier had previously, before this meeting, actually spoke about AI technology and how there's a need to create laws and rules or regulations for generative AI. How important is this when it comes to the world of AI? Because now some people are actually talking about the fact that with the rapid development of AI, it's become out of control, and setting rules and regulations is not something that is achievable.
Definitely, because technology is always progressing at a faster pace rather than regulations. So technology comes first, then the regulation comes second. So this is a very important notion, because we need to regulate this unregulated, fast-paced development kind of technology. In Egypt, actually, a few days ago, the Ministry of Communication and Information Technology issued the framework for responsible AI usage. And this is mainly for having AI for the betterment of the society, for the betterment of the economy, making AI safer, and making AI designed from the beginning to be not the replacement of jobs for human beings, unless for high-risk jobs, for making AI able to be explained, to have ethical way of dealing with AI algorithms, especially in defense applications. This is to deal with the challenge related to the discrimination or the misuse of AI for targeting specific race or sex or gender, making the final decision of AI to the human being, not to the machine, and also to make the institutions, the organizations responsible for the decision taken by AI algorithms.
Sir, how do you see actually the cooperation between China and the US when it comes to AI? Because there's always the issues that we usually hear when it comes to like tech wars, where sometimes the Silicon Valley accuses China of basically stealing their technology. Is this something that is the US side might be fearful of?
This is, I think, it's an inflection point because actually AI and high tech was in the middle of the trade war between the two giants, the US and China, because China is investing like almost 20 billion US dollars a year in high tech domain, especially in AI. Yes. And even they are investing in AI-based startups working from the United States. And this issue had been raised to the surface since Trump administration a few years ago. And actually Trump prevented and halted the investment of Chinese companies into the U.S. market, especially in AI-based enterprises or startups. So this is a complete change now. This is maybe this will ease the tension between the two leading economies and open new horizons for more reasonable, more sensible, more secured utilization of technology, especially in this domain, because actually AI is changing a lot of concepts when it comes to different industries, including the defense industry. So this is, I think it's a great step towards having things work more smoothly, towards have more peaceful application and more applications that serve the community at large, especially the people and the economic development all over the world.
Yeah, so you actually spoke about the idea of AI adding to jobs rather than take away from the jobs of people, basically. Do you think that this is actually something that is viable? I mean, right now, the AI isn't very far along. We're still in the very beginnings of what AI could truly be in the next few years. We're already starting to see jobs going away. Is it actually viable to say that there will be some sort of regulations so that people don't lose their jobs because of AI?
Hopefully, it will be viable and will be implementable. Otherwise, the whole world will witness a huge problem and a huge challenge, because actually all the time technology changes and alters the job market now, and even since the first industrial revolution that took place in England in late 18th century. So this is the case all over the world, and this is the case when it comes to the progression of technology. That's why we need to have more capable workforce that can work with machines. We are talking here about a new concept, a new notion about human-machine collaboration rather than competition, because any job can be automated, would be automated. This is how it works. And we are working in the area that machines do not work and or would be not able to deal with. So with this advancement of technology, with the new concepts of the fourth industrial revolution and beyond the fourth industrial revolution, is becoming a more challenging issue, and hopefully by regulations this will be considered while developing AI for serving different industries, to leave a room for human beings to work. Otherwise it would be a really global challenge, and this has been discussed over the last few years. In 2020, the World Economic Forum issued or launched an initiative called Reskilling Revolution to reskill 1 billion people by 2030 all over the world, to make them able to work within the circumstances of the technology development that comes with and along with the post-industrial revolution. So this is how it works, and hopefully by regulating this issue, that could be one of the solutions to the nature or the changing nature of the job market all over the world.
Yes. I mean, this is not necessarily related to the jobs idea, but some tech experts, including people like Elon Musk, spoke about the dangers of AI and that now we have reached the level of no return, since AI is actually now available and readily available and has access to the internet. Do you believe that regulations post-fact may not actually help when it comes to controlling AI, not towards the job, but controlling AI as a machine that thinks?
This is another hard question, actually, because technology domain by nature is unregulated because it's mainly developed by startups, by individuals working from home, and they are not in a structured manner or in a structured format, actually. And most of this technology coming from what's called open source. It's available for everyone to develop it. And actually being that open source, it helps the technology to progress at 30x compared to other technologies. Over the last 5 years, the number of patents in AI increased by 30 times compared to the last 5 years. And that's why also, on the other hand, the size of investment increased from 50 billion US dollar a year to almost 100 billion US dollars a year. So it's a very hard formula to control. However, many governments all over the world are now keen to regulate as much as they can this uncontrolled and unprecedented level of technological development that are taking place all over the world. So it's very hard to compromise all things. However, now at least the governments all over the world thinking of having this sort of regulations to have a room for everyone to benefit from the technology advancement rather than having a huge damage or a considerable damage to the life that we know today.
Okay, Dr. Mohammed Azam, a technology expert, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to take a short break and move on with the rest of the episode. In the world of culture, Iraq unveiled on Sunday a 2,800-year-old stone tablet returned by Italy as the war-ravaged country works to recover from abroad antiquities looted from its territory. The tablet, whose text is written in cuneiform, the Babylonian alphabet, bears the insignia of Shalmaneser III, the Assyrian king who ruled the region of Nimrud in northern Iraq from 858 to 823 BC. The circumstances surrounding the tablet's arrival in Italy remain unclear. The Italian authorities handed it over to the Iraqi president, Abdulatif Rashid, during a visit to Bologna over the past week. Rashid addressed a ceremony Sunday at the Baghdad presidential palace, thanking the Italian officials for their efforts and cooperation in bringing back the artifact ahead of it handing it over to the National Museum. He underlined the importance of the piece, whose cuneiform text is complete. Modern Iraq's territory is the cradle of the Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian and Assyrian civilizations to which humanity owes writing and the first cities. France striker Kylian Mbappe scored another milestone as his side maintained their perfect record in the Euro 2024 qualifying Group B with a 1-0 home victory against Greece, who finished with 10 men after a late sending off on Monday. Mbappe netted a second-half penalty to become the all-time leading French scorer over a season with 54 goals for club and country, beating the mark set by Just Fontaine in 1957-58. It also helped the Paris Saint-Germain forward to move level with Manchester City striker Erling Haaland, who has the chance to finish as top scorer among those playing in the 5 main European leagues. When Norway faces Cyprus on Tuesday, the results left France top with 12 points, 6 ahead of second-place Greece, who had Konstantinos Mavropanos sent off in the 69th minute after Mbappe's 55th minute spot kick. Chelsea have signed French forward Christopher Nkunku from Leipzig on a 6-year contract, the Premier League club announced on Tuesday. The 25-year-old, who had 23 goals and 9 assists in 36 appearances in the Bundesliga side this past season, has been capped 10 times for France and will be Chelsea's first signing under new manager Mauricio Pochettino. Chelsea did not reveal the financial details of the deal, but British media said it was close to $76.69 million. The Stamford Bridge outfit will seek to revive their fortunes under former Tottenham Hotspur manager Pochettino after finishing 12th in the recently concluded campaign, their worst finish in a season since 1994. Argentina struggled to create chances without Lionel Messi in the team as it labored to a 2-0 win over Indonesia in a friendly on Monday, with both goals coming from defensive-minded players. Holding midfielders Leonardo Paredes scored a long-range opener in the first half just as the team was growing frustrated at its inability to break down a team ranked 149th in the world. Tottenham defender Christian Romero added the second soon after the break. Messi, who scored in a 2-1 win over Australia in Beijing on Thursday, was allowed to return home earlier by coach Lionel Scaloni in order to rest. The 35-year-old Messi is expected to make his debut for Inter Miami in July after leaving Paris Saint-Germain for the MLS club earlier this month. In tennis, Wimbledon runner-up Nick Kyrgios has pulled out of the Halle tournament in Germany due to an ongoing issue with his knee. And the Australian said on Monday he wanted to give his body a chance to be ready for the grass court Grand Slam. The 28-year-old Nick Kyrgios underwent surgery on a left knee injury earlier in the year and was beaten in his comeback match after a 5-month layoff when he fell to China's Wu Yibing in the Stuttgart Open first round last week. He had trouble with his movement during that match, and the problem has now forced Kyrgios to pull out of the ATP 500 event in Halle, where he reached the semi-finals in 2022. The world number 31 will be replaced in the Halle draw by lucky loser Aslan Karastov. Organizers added the Wimbledon build-up tournament began earlier on Monday. Kyrgios, who lost to Novak Djokovic in the Wimbledon final last year, had previously played a singles match in October in Tokyo and pulled out of the Australia Open in January in the lead-up to the tournament. He missed the French Open due to foot injury he sustained during a theft of his car last month. Wimbledon will begin on July 3rd. Well, this brings us to the end of the sports news in this edition of Nile TV Newsroom Live. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more here on Nile TV.